many ways, we were all rivals, I guess, in a way, because we all wanted to be doing something that someone else was doing. We all wanted to be in a similar kind of place. But what ended up happening was we were all inspiring each other. You know, it was just like, then you did something and someone else was just like, man, that was like what you just did. Oh, that was like, and what's bizarrely funny about that whole situation is that oftentimes it didn't feel like you were doing anything.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Way of the Artist podcast. We are very happy to be here. Happy to be talking about some topics that we think are kind of interesting. Hopefully you think the same. Having a beer, see what comes out. And today we're talking about when the plan goes out the window. And this was something that was somewhat relevant for me over the last little bit. I've been involved with this theatrical production over the last number of months, and it's been up on stage, and it's been a fantastic experience. And I've been acting for a long time. I mean, I got involved in acting when I knew I wanted to be an actor when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and started doing my first classes around the same time. And this part that I've been doing has challenged me in ways that I've never been challenged in any other sort of production or role that I've taken on. So this was something that I thought was very interesting, because it's like, you know, sometimes we get into a position where no matter how much experience that we've had, sometimes our ways of dealing with things, our plans, our processes get a wrench thrown into them. And what the hell to do when that happens, right? And I guess in some ways my experience has helped me in this whole thing, because it's taught me to basically pay attention to when this stuff happens, not to panic when this happens. So we'll get more into this, but I've been going off on the intro here. So Brandon, why don't you say something?
Well, I mean, when you mentioned this as a topic of conversation, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great plan, Evan. It sounds like a great plan. Let's see if it goes to plan. I mean, as a filmmaker, I mean, man, like indie filmmaking, so much of it is just not going to plan. Like, you just expect it, right? Like, I think if anybody wants to be a filmmaker, that is, especially in the indie level, like when you're just starting out and, you know, you don't have the money and the resources and the connections, so much of it is just about being able to respond to what's going wrong or not going to plan, wrong in quotations, and then responding to it and making something out of it. You know, there's a movie I did once where we had a cafe, right? And it had a pretty important scene in it, and did all the legwork, you know, secured the place, whatever. Then the owner of the cafe called us literally the night before filming and said, I changed my mind. I don't want you guys to use the cafe anymore. And we were like, okay, well, man, we're in trouble. But, you know, at this point, I had had a bit of experience with filmmaking. I knew things go wrong. I'm always prepared. And so there were cafes at UBC, which is where I went to school, and I found UBC to be a super film-friendly campus, right? Like, I could usually just go up to just about anybody and say, like, hey, do you mind if we film here? And they'd be cool with it. So it's always kind of a good default. But anyway, we ended up filming. I went to this other cafe, and it was kind of just, you know, very guerrilla. And I said, do you mind if we film this scene out front of your cafe? And they're like, oh, yeah, go ahead. And there's this shot, and I've talked about it before, but there's this shot of the female actress in the, you know, and the sun is going down over the mountains just behind her. We got that perfect orange glow coming through. I have this like long lens on her, so it's like she's really in focus and everything is out of focus behind her, but it's just these beautiful like angelic colors.
Yeah.
And you just would have totally not had that opportunity had we had it go to plan. And so I guess what I would contribute to this immediately in the conversation is that sometimes when things go to plan, it's an opportunity for them to go better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, they're not going to go as good as you want. But one thing that I've been learning, and more just even in my life today, is that whenever things don't go to plan, is that I can look at it two ways. I can look at it as a setback, or I can look at it as an opportunity. And I'm really being diligent about looking at these things as opportunities, because just recently things have not gone to plan in a lot of areas, So I'm kind of like, okay, well, what's the opportunity? What's the growth thing that could come out of this?
Yeah. And that's really what I've been learning myself, or just maybe relearning, getting a better understanding of this just through my own experience. Because like I was saying, like with this role that I'm doing, it's the nature of the character is one where it's like it, in acting, like a lot of how I was trained and taught and stuff like that, it was taught in a lot of ways of there's a lot of kind of cut and dry mentalities. It's just like, no, this is kind of like you come in and you have your objective, you have what you're doing, and you've come in with this like heavy emotional life and blah, blah, blah. And not that any of this stuff is not true, but I find myself playing a character who kind of lives in an almost personal limbo.
What do you mean?
So it's a character who, it's not that they don't have a lot going on with them, because I've never really played a character who's had such a complex depth of things going on with them. But when it comes to the way that they go about things, it's kind of like everything is very close to the chest, and everything is not quite what it seems. There's a multitude of things going on with them at the same time. So, like one of the specific things that, I was trained to as an actor is, before you step out on stage, a lot of actors can relate to this, you have what's called like your moment before, right? Where are you just coming from? What just happened to you? And what's the emotion that you're coming in with, right? So I spent a lot of time training and working on, okay, before I come out, just building up so I have a really strong, full emotion going on before I step out. And with this character, it's the emotion that they're coming out with is really not so clear cut. It's a very, they're a very human kind of person. They don't often show what they're actually feeling. In fact, they rarely show what they're actually feeling. And it presented this really, because it's like a lot of stuff that I've worked on before, it's like, I know exactly what's going on at the start of this. It's just like, okay, at the start of the scene, I know I need to get myself into an extreme state of agitation.
Sure.
To get myself ready for this. Or I have to be coming in from a place of like really deep sorrow, or whatever it is. And there's usually a fairly clear indication of what that is. And with this, there's not really any clear indication of what they're coming in with at any time. There's maybe one scene in which it's pretty obvious. But the rest of it has provided this challenge, because I'm like, geez, like this is throwing off my usual process of how I do this, because I love coming in with that full, rich emotional thing happening, because it gives me something to just ride into the scene with, right? It helps me get out of my head. It helps me to just perform. And with this, like, it's been this challenge of second guessing myself. Was a lot of it. It's like, well, what am I coming in with? Can I come in with this strong of a thing? So it's forced me to take a look at my own process, but also it's put me into a place of having to, as I said, pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention, and by that I mean pay attention to what is the need of the scene. What is the need of the character? Like getting back to almost, it's kind of like the law of simplicity, right? It's like come back to something really simple, because it was getting very confusing for me, right? Like I said, I was second guessing myself. And once that starts happening, you can start to panic a little bit, and you can start to like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And being able to just say, okay, well, what is the thing, what do I know about this character? And basically learn to just pay attention to what the needs are of what's going on. And with that, I've been able to start to find my way through, and also discovered some areas where I was holding back, some areas where I wasn't being as courageous as I could be.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been, like you said, there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
When the plan goes out, when the system fails, however you want to put this, there's some kind of an opportunity. And it really only presents itself if you can remain kind of calm within it.
Yes. I think calmness is so important. It's interesting as you're talking about an acting situation, and I'm trying to pair it in my mind as I'm listening to you to life, and how does this relate to life? And, life is so much like this situation you're dealing with, because, there's so many times where we expect to walk into a situation and feel a certain way. Like, I'm going to go to my audition and I'm going to be excited and it's going to be fun. And then all of a sudden the day comes and you're about to go to the audition and an anxiety thing hits, or it's not, or someone calls you or something happens and it just throws off the whole plan. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're walking into this situation and you might have a lot of pressure on this audition, or maybe you're even going to set. Who knows what it is? And, and these can happen, and that, it's so important to remain calm and to breathe and to let this be okay, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Because I think the immediate thing that most people will experience is when things don't go to plan, the immediate response is, well, it's not okay. I'm not in control. Yeah. It's not okay. I'm out of control, And I think the illusion really is, and this is the kind of lesson I've been getting hit with over and over and over again, is that none of us are really in control.
Yeah.
We keep thinking we're in control. We like the illusion of being in control, but we're not in control in necessarily the way that we think we're in control. And sometimes you could argue that we're not even in control of as much as we think we're in control of. We are kind of in control of ourselves, but we're not really in control of ourselves. We're only in control of our response to ourselves, because our bodies and our minds are literally like, they're changing and evolving and they're doing things. So you can have an emotion that comes up in your body that you didn't necessarily initiate, but that can happen. Yeah. And it can happen seemingly without an outside stimulus, or the stimulus that got you, that made you respond that way, is just not in your conscious awareness. So you don't know why it hit you. So your only control is how you respond to that emotional reaction that you seem to be having in your body. Mm-hmm. So the amount of control we have is really quite limited, but we want to try to control, we want to kind of control our emotions. We want to control other people. We want to control situations. And those things, the further you get out, the more you get out, to a person, to people, to a situation, to an environment, the more you're going to lose your mind, because you're not in control of that stuff. Yeah. You're only in control of your response to that stuff.
Yeah. And you're in control of your attention.
Yes.
Really is one of the things that, and it's funny because I teach actors this, the whole method that I work on with actors is this thing of attention. And it breaks down our control mechanisms, right? And actually reveals how these control mechanisms actually are getting in the way of being great actors.
Right.
And it's been kind of, there's nothing like getting a bit of a taste of your own medicine sometimes, but it's terrific. It's humbling and it's a terrific learning experience. Like some of my favorite philosophers and thinkers and stuff, I think of Krishnamurti as well as Carl Jung, who talked about this, which is that when we are so heavily identified and entrenched with our ideologies, our systems, our beliefs, what have you, the more strongly identified and attached to these things we are, the less able we are to actually live in the reality of what is. Mm-hmm. Because we're not seeing things as they are. We're seeing things as we are, as the expression goes. We're seeing things as we project them out to be. So it's not to say that these systems and these tools are not useful, because for the most part, all of my processes in acting have been for the most part, very functional and have served me very well, even within this production. But there are certain areas where it's just like, oh, this doesn't solve this problem. This doesn't help me with this certain thing. I don't have a button to push that just fixes this. Right. Which is, that's kind of part of the wonderful thing, because it takes us into an unknown territory. It takes us into a place that we're not familiar with. And that's the only place where we learn new things. And as one of my old teachers would say, it's like the unknown is also the only place where anything truly creative happens.
Right. That was what I was just going to say, is that you could argue that all art is a risk. If it's not a risk, it's not actually art. There's a saying that if you know the result, it's not a risk.
Yeah.
And if you think about control is controlling for a result that you think you should get, or you think that things should happen a certain way or be a certain way. And when you're in that state of trying to control that and trying to predict and trying to know, you're not in the creative state. You're not in the artist state. And, I would say that actually the awareness I'm having as we're having this conversation is I think what we're really trying to say is to ourselves and to others is like, encourage yourself to go into a state of the unknown, to go into a state of being open to anything and being confident in yourself enough that you'll respond as necessary, appropriately, whatever is required of you in that moment when it happens. Mm-hmm. The only thing that is happening is right now.
Yeah.
And you can hear that 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times,
and you
still,
probably have heard it 1,000 times.
You still won't get it, right? Like, hearing it is not enough. But if you look at everything and you go, okay, well, whatever is right now this is it, and whatever you think might happen, you don't know for sure, and there's no way to control for that. You can have your best guess, but sometimes you'll be wrong. And you can look back in the past and say, well, this, and this happened this way before, so it should happen again. And lo and behold, it doesn't. So the past isn't really a great dictator of the future either.
Yeah.
So, I think in a lot of ways, when things don't go to plan, abandoning the plan and being willing to replan and re-strategize is kind of what's necessary.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like when the plan goes out the window, it's asking for you to come up with come up with a new plan,
a better plan,
because it doesn't mean that there's no plan required, but it's just that whatever is right in front of you is something different. It's something unknown,
right?
And whatever you've come in with is not the thing. It's not the ticket for this one.
It's not the tool. Okay, here's a good example. I think maybe this can help people kind of grasp this idea, because it took me a little bit of time to wake up to it. But I went through this stage of not being motivated towards making money or earning or saving or just doing anything in that. And I was like, I want things. There's these things I want, but for some reason that doesn't get me jumping out of bed motivated to actually go and get them. It was really strange. It was like this disconnect. and maybe other people can relate to this. It's like you know what you want, but you don't have the motivation to go get it, but you want the motivation to get it, yet you don't know how to get the motivation to get it.
Yeah.
But it's like, why am I not motivated? I know what I want. You know what I mean? It's this kind of weird kind of trap you almost feel like you're in. And so, I kind of had my heart to heart myself and my talk with the universe, if you want to call it that, right? And I said, okay, look, I need to get connected to my dreams and goals here, because I have dreams and goals, but I'm not the person who's going to go live them right now. Like, for some reason, I don't know what's wrong, but this is what's going on. And I really believe either my higher self or the universe or something, nature just responded, and it said, okay, fine, you want this? This is what's going to happen. You want to learn how to swim? We're going to kick you into the deep end. You're just going to have to go. We're going to throw you off the boat, and you're going to have to learn how to swim. And so what I started to realize was that when you ask for what you want, you'll often get a lot of pain back, because pain is actually the motivator. They say that we are motivated for pleasure, but we're motivated 3 times, 10 times more for pain. And what I found was that once I started experiencing some pain, I'll tell you, man, I got super motivated about making money and changing my situation. But when it was just for pleasure, it wasn't enough to get me going. And so sometimes I think when the things don't go to plan, actually what it does is it creates pain. And pain motivates you more than pleasure does. Sometimes the motivation you need to think outside the box, to do something differently, to just get off your ass and get out of a situation. And by change, by the pain causing you to change, creates a different perspective, a different point of view, and then ergo you have different actions, different behaviors, and all of a sudden, boom, you're in momentum.
Yeah.
Right?
And I would say that that's like the most important thing that you can get from that is it's a change in your point of view.
Right.
A lot of times it's like, pain it's not about because ultimately the whole sort of being motivated by pain and pleasure, like they're actually, if you look at what a lot of great thinkers and philosophers have said about this, they're the same thing.
Right.
When you are driven by pain and pleasure, you're ultimately, like, this is the Buddhist concept essentially of suffering. Like, you're caught in this cycle of, going for, because the thing is like when you're going for pleasure, it automatically attracts pain.
Right.
Because you begin, your focus is now on that thing that you don't have. It's always just like, I want this, but I don't have this.
Right.
Right. And you're constantly in that cycle, because then you have it and then it doesn't really deliver any lasting thing. So then there's another thing you have to get, and there's another thing. And so it's just this endless thing of I don't have. So it just continually creates a sense of lack in your life.
Right.
That was a bit of a side tangent, but what I was really meaning to say is that, like, what that pain, the best thing that it can teach you is about breaking some of those cycles.
Right.
Is about breaking some of how you've thought about things, how you've gone about things, and saying like, oh wow, what do I actually really want? It can bring you right down to your blood and bones.
Yeah.
Like when you hit a point of pain, and in that way it can be a gift. It doesn't mean that you have to go seeking out pain. I don't necessarily agree with that. But when pain arises, it's worth getting kind of curious about. And we actually just had a podcast released recently about curiosity. And that's a really great, I think, complementary talk to this one as well, because curiosity is a great way to approach things when things don't go to plan.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, so what might be some solutions to this? What might I be overlooking? And with that, because we're also talking about the unknown here as well, and also I think the law of play comes into this one. Like anytime like unknown comes up, play has to come in there, because play is a terrific way to navigate that unknown space.
Right.
It's like very often our instinct of I don't know what this is to, again, panic, to kind of clam up and to freak out, and that just shuts us down to a large extent. But then to approach it with curiosity instead is kind of a form of play, and just say, okay, let's see what this is. Let's see what's here that I'm missing, and we can flip our perspective on that and turn that into something that's a little bit more useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you bring up a good point, because the law of play, which is something anybody who, if you haven't listened to that one, go listen to that one. That's a great one. Not only will it inspire more fun and openness in your life, but like, it's such a great law and it's such a great tool just to use in your life in so many applications. And I think when things don't go to plan, it is an opportunity to play. You're like, okay, well, there's a point where, you're just like, well, fuck it. Like, things are not working. So, you know what? I'm just going to and when you have nothing to lose and you try some things, that's often when the greatest things come out of it. And that getting to that point of just like, fuck it. Let's just try some stuff, because like, I got nothing to lose anymore, because clearly what I've been doing isn't working. So, and I find for myself, a lot of times when my best self comes forth is when I abandon the plan and I say, okay, well, you know what? The plan didn't work, so we're going to try something else.
Yeah.
And I don't think you shouldn't plan. Like, I don't think you should not plan. I still think you should plan. I still think you should prepare. I still think, law of discipline, you could say the practice and putting things into motion is a good thing.
Yeah.
But, understand that just because you have discipline, just because you plan, just because you prepare, does not guarantee you the result. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just, don't do it because you're trying to guarantee a result. Do it because it sets you up to be at the best you can be when you get to where you need to be, whether it goes to plan or not.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing I'll just say is that, you talked about pleasure and pain being connected. Well, passion, from what I understand, is actually, what it means is joy pain. It's the pain, it's pain, and it's related to joy. Like, you really can't have passion without pain. And, you kind of like learn to embrace pain in a way in which it becomes your friend, not your enemy. And I think the thing is like, you ever played paintball, for example?
I actually haven't.
You never have?
I've never played.
Well, if you ever play, listen, anybody who hasn't played and anybody who has played, they know this. The first time you go out on the field, before you've ever been shot by a paintball, you're like, it's going to hurt. And you don't know what it's going to hurt like. And it's a scary thing. And you're like, man, I don't want to get shot. You just like, and then you do, and it stings and it hurts, right? And if you get lit up, it really hurts, right? But there's a certain point, and I used to play paintball a lot, and I got past this point, where what happens is you get to the point where you don't fear the pain anymore. And then you start doing some really interesting stuff. Like, you start to rush people in an unexpected way, or you start to be more aggressive, or just basically put yourself in more risky positions, but you can change the dynamic of the game by being this kind of player, by being a force. But you have to get over that fear of pain.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes paintball such an interesting sport is that the reality of getting lit up, the reality of getting, in a painful situation, is there always. And I think life's a little bit like that, when you're going for what you want. That, if you want to love somebody, you got to be willing to get heartbroken. It's always, the pain is always right there with it. And it's necessary.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of what you were saying earlier about this thing of control, what we actually have control over, and accepting that we don't have control over most things. Because, like, if you think of any sport, like you're just saying that, I'm like, you think of any sport, it doesn't exist without an opponent.
Yeah.
It's just not, it doesn't happen.
Even if the opponent is yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like on the artistic side of things, particularly, like, especially if you're a writer or a painter, it's like you got the blank page or the blank canvas.
Yeah.
And, and it's this thing of coming up against yourself and seeing what comes out. But even on like the sort of the more obvious metaphor of a sport where it's like you have another opponent or there's another team that you're up against, it is necessary for the both of you in order for the game to happen. It's necessary. Otherwise, what are we even doing?
Right.
What are we even watching? There's no game to be had.
Yeah.
Unless there is an adversary. And I don't mean to say this in a sense of like of some sort of materialistic, very sort of brutal thing about life is just about competition and whatever. It's like it's not, because competition and collaboration or cooperation are, again, these are things that are sides of the same coin, right? Like in sports, they're both competing and cooperating with each other because they've agreed to do this together.
Yeah, under certain rules, and and there's certain agreements that are made, which make it sport.
Yeah.
Like if you take fighting, for example, like a street fight or a literal like life and death fight versus a sport fight is very different.
Yeah.
And there's certain rules that they abide by so that nobody dies, right? So that they can still live to fight again.
Yeah.
Because in real war, in a real fight, it's not designed for someone to walk away. It's designed for one person to be dead.
Yeah.
Like if you go back in history, before fighting was sport, you either were the one who was victorious and you lived, or you were the one who was defeated and you died.
Yeah.
Or you were so brutally injured you weren't able to get back up, and your reparations to try and heal your body were severe. So like, I think when we're talking about things not going to plan, when it's a life or death situation, obviously, if you're in that situation, there's a certain kind of risk that you don't want to take. I'm just going to kind of go off on a tangent here for a second.
Yeah, okay.
Military, like elite soldiers, special operations, this type of thing. They like, failure is not an option, right? Like that's kind of the way in which they're not competing. That's not about a competition. That's about dominance. That is about execution. That's about like getting it right because life is on the line, and maybe the consequences of failure lead to drastic negatives, right? But when we're talking about art and we're talking about sport, it is an arena of play. It's an arena of where things don't have to go to plan. Failure is an option. In fact, it's actually embraced upon, right?
Yeah.
So I think when things don't go to plan, you don't have to experience it like it's life or death. You can experience it like, okay, this is an opportunity to learn and grow and change and evolve and adapt and do something different. And by the way, some of the best acting I've ever seen, and the best actors, the best performances were from weaker characters that lose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they go in with all intent to win and they don't. Like look at Godfather. I mean, look at the brother, right?
Yeah.
Like what an incredible character,
Or even like the it's kind of a cliche, but the story of Rocky.
Right.
He loses at the end of that. Spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't seen Rocky.
Get on it. It doesn't matter, even if you know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, there's loads of these stories about, the people who just played the game and they played it with honor and they played it with heart.
Yeah.
And that being of greater value than who won or lost at the end of it all, because it was like, I guess the story of Rocky is he lost the fight, but he won in his life in some way, right?
Well, the movie Braveheart, for example, that won so many Oscars. I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't about, obviously, it wasn't about, I mean, sure, you can talk about the accuracy of the story and whatever, but it wasn't about as much about him living as it was about him making a point of freedom, and
and that's actually that is something that crossed my mind a little while ago. One of my favorite sort of people out there these days, Simon Sinek, he talks about this thing called the infinite game, and he also talks about having not I think it's something like a worthy rival, but he talks about the importance of having a rival, and not in the sense of maliciously trying to undermine this other person, but that your rival should be somebody who does something that's kind of the same as you, but who is better than you in many ways. That is so important to have in your life. And it's a thing of having a respect for that person or that organization, whatever it is. And, you know, I can really give testament to this because, I mean, I remember like the best acting program that I was ever in. You know, there was like 30 of us in this classroom, and it was such an incredible atmosphere of everybody truly caring and appreciating each other, and all of us pushing each other. We would see somebody get up on stage and do their work, and it was so amazing, you know, and we would just go, oh man, I want to be at that level. Mm-hmm. And just everybody, it seemed on like every single day, everybody was getting better. Everybody was just going beyond what they had done before. Mm. So we were all pushing each other. So in many ways, we were all rivals, I guess, in a way, because we all wanted to be doing something that someone else was doing. We all wanted to be in a similar kind of place. But what ended up happening was we were all inspiring each other. You know, it was just like then you did something and someone else was just like, man, that was like what you just did. Oh, that was like, and what's bizarrely funny about that whole situation is that oftentimes it didn't feel like you were doing anything. Mm. You know, like you were just kind of showing up as best as you could. And it really resonated with someone. It really touched somebody. And another thing you don't have control over. Yeah. Yeah. Right?
Well,
like it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think the thing is if things always went to plan, if things always go to plan, you'll never really grow and change. You know, you'll just kind of continue to do as you do. And, you know, I don't think any of us should be under the assumption that the way that we do life is somehow the way, like it's somehow accurate, like it's somehow the best. Mm-hmm. And, you know, all these things that don't go to plan is kind of a wake up to say like, hey, well, maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't have it all together, and maybe that's okay. Like maybe this is an opportunity to figure something out, to learn something, to find out about myself, you know? So I think, you know, when things don't go to plan, when the plan goes out the window, you know, you don't have to go out there with it, you know? You are still here. Mm-hmm. And now you're in a new situation, so just adapt. Like just go and think about it and go, okay, well, this is what happened, this is where I'm at, this is what I can do. And, you know, I would also say, like, the power of perspective is just, it's your most powerful tool as a human being, is your ability to look at something differently. Mm-hmm. And my biggest thing that I encourage myself and I encourage any client I ever work with or whatever is start looking at things differently. If they're not working for you, look at them differently. Like, look at pain as a gift. And don't look at it as like, I want more pain, but look at it like, okay, well, what is pain teaching me? What is it giving me the opportunity of? You know, if things don't work out, look at that as a gift. Try and see the benefit of it. Try and change your perspective around it. Because I really only believe that there's two roles you get to play in life. At the end of the day, there's only one of two. You either play the victim or you play the champion. And you get to choose every day and every moment and every beat. And every time the plan goes out the window, if you choose victim, that's your fucking problem. Bottom line, in my opinion, that's it. You know, be the champion of it. Like, be the person that gets back up. You got knocked down, get back up and go at it again and look at it and learn from it. Yeah. And recognize that something went wrong and this is a chance for you to be better. Just change your view on it. That's what I say.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that we all, at different moments, we play both of those roles. Yes. You know, it's not just about, you know, I'm victim all the time or I'm champion all the time. You know, like we go through ups and downs in our lives, and I know that definitely I go through things just like, and it's catching yourself sometimes just like, oh wow, like I am victimizing myself. I'm making myself a victim to this, and I'm not making creative choices, you know, and so there's going to be that movement that happens, and ideally what we want to try and do is play the champion more than we play the victim. But in those moments where we find ourselves playing the victim, with the self-awareness that that's what's happening, that's the moment that we actually start to become champions.
Yes.
You know, which is kind of the crazy part about the whole thing.
Well, I think awareness, like recognizing yourself in your moment of, in your moment of victimhood, in your moment of being the victim and saying, life is hard and this isn't fair. That's victim, right? So, catching yourself and going, okay, I'm playing the victim right now. What is that doing for you? What is that doing for me if you're doing that, right? I think that most of the time we go for victim because it allows us to stay the same, and it allows us to get something kind of unearned, that's like sympathy or, comfort or, whatever. And it gives us a temporary, like immediate, usually good thing. But it comes with a cost and on the back end, and you have to pay for it later. But you don't always see the cost on the back end, and that's why you would choose it.
Yeah.
The champion, you bump your knee, you hurt yourself, you do whatever you do, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you okay?" And the champion goes, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I can get past this. I can walk it off. I can deal with it." It doesn't get the, "Oh, let me nurse you back to health. Let me comfort you. Let me hold you." The champion carries on, but you bumped yourself, you scraped yourself, you figuratively, whatever, hurt yourself in some way. But, you kind of got to ask yourself, like, is this going to stop me? Do I want to stop and let everyone surround me and just go, are you okay? Or do I want to be like, okay, whatever, like, this is temporary, this pain is temporary, I'm going to carry on and walk it off. But it's not necessarily a victim if you stop and get care. And I want to make that point. Sometimes you're gonna eat it, in life. And I'm not just talking about physically fall. I'm talking about you're gonna get buried. Things are gonna happen. And that's a time sometimes where you need your friends and family and people around to say like, hey, like, we're here for you, we got you, we're gonna mend you back to health. Because literally you just can't get up and go and carry on in life because it was too devastating. Mm-hmm. And that's a time where you need to be mindful enough to go, the champion isn't the person that carries on, but the person that accepts friendship and love and the community they built around themselves. But that's for each and every person to decide. And I think that's where it gets a little complicated. It's not always black and white. The victim is not always doing the same behavior, and the champion is not always doing the same behavior. And I think you pointed out the most important thing. You're not just a champion or a victim. You're a champion in some areas of your life, and you're a victim in others. And really, you just want to root out the areas where you're a victim, in my opinion. Just root them out, catch yourself in them, because you're probably a champion in many areas. And there's just these one or two or a few little areas where you let yourself be the victim, and it lets you down time after time again, and it keeps you stuck. And that's the thing you got to tackle. That's the thing you got to change. Mm-hmm. And when the plan goes out the window, that's probably a moment for you to identify your victimhood.
That's like some just like good like nuts and bolts right there, friend.
That's all I got. You want to talk about this brew?
Yeah, let's do a quick chat about this brew. Again, we're not sponsored by anybody here.
No, we just we have a brew. The story is, if this is your first podcast with us, we have a brew every podcast because Evan and I, as artists, we'd get together and we'd chat, and we started having a beer as we would chat, and these conversations were really great. So we kept the tradition of having a beer on the podcast, and we like kind of supporting craft brews, and we think they're kind of an art in and of themselves, and so we have a new and different one on every cast we do. Yeah.
So this one, I mean, you picked it out today.
Read it out. Go ahead.
This is from Fernie Brewing Company here in beautiful British Columbia, and this is called Java the Hutt, and it's a coffee milk stout, smooth, dark, and creamy.
Definitely is smooth, dark, and creamy.
It is all of those things, and definitely it's got that coffee hit to it. Again, it's like it's that time of year where it's dark beer drinking time again.
Yeah.
I don't often go for them, but I usually enjoy them. So I don't know why.
Yeah. For me, the dark beers tend to be a fall, winter kind of beer. Mm-hmm. I'm probably not on my own on that. But yeah, it's been a little chilly here in our city, and I don't know, just the dark and creamy and smooth kind of like beer just sounded like the right feel for today. So.
Yeah, it's just like it tastes like spices and, like, I don't know. There's just something that it's very appropriate for the changing of the seasons and the cooler weather. So
yeah, it's been a good one.
It's been good. It's been good.
Smooth and easy too, in its own way.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this baby up. Let's talk about this. What do we come to here?
What do we come to here? Well, I mean, I don't know. I really want to just bring this thing up partially because it was something that has come up for me, and just to talk that through and some of those discoveries, and also just open up that to our audience here, just to think about these things, about when the plan goes out the window, how do we respond? What does that tell us when things completely go out the window? And for me, I mean, I think we came to this fairly early on, but really it is that opportunity to learn and to grow. It's a reminder that, hey, look, ultimately things change. We don't have ultimate control over things. I mean, history, if anything, has shown us change. And there have been, tyrants and all kinds of different, like, world powers and leaders and whatever who have had incredible power and ability to try and control and to, oppress and all of these different things. And it all ultimately breaks down. Mm-hmm. No one in the history of this earth has ever had the ability to control things ultimately. And so that should say something to us, and for us to look at our need to control and how we try to control, and that essentially we can have our plans, and that's great, but that there's always at some point where the plan has to be let go of. And I think it's easier if we consciously do that, as opposed to waiting for the plan to go to shit. Right. And this is something, again, this is, a weird sort of thing that actors learn, or at least if actors have had any sort of good teachers, which is that you can have prepared as much this part as you at home, and writing and doing whatever kind of work that you have. You can do as much of that as you can, and that's great. But ultimately, you have to let it all go. Because when it comes to the moment, you have to respond to what's happening right in front of you. And that's not always going to fit with the plan. Or the plan's not always going to fit with that.
Yeah.
And that's when you just need to respond. And it's better that you just come in with just like, I'm just going to respond with what happens. And you trust that all of that work that you've done, all of that planning, the places where it's going to work, the places where the plan is going to fit, it will fit. And that the rest is going to be on your ability to respond, and your ability to respond through actually really paying attention is going to be enough. It will resolve the holes in the plan. So, yeah. I'll leave it there.
Well, you left it in a good spot. I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that you plan and you strategize and you do all this because by doing that, you will probably fill in most of the gaps. You probably put most of it together.
You'll have a good foundation.
Yeah. But I think that you have to kind of be prepared that you won't always put it all together. And there'll be missing pieces and there'll be parts. I think from being somebody who kind of started their career out of being like basically an independent, filmmaker, somebody who didn't necessarily have the means and the budget or support or anything, basically making films for me was, you just did your best, man. I mean, you were throwing it together as you best you could. If you had a location available, you used it as an opportunity. If there wasn't a lot of room to prepare, there wasn't a lot of money to prepare, and when you're young and you don't like own any property or have a lot of connections, or you're new to a city or whatever, like you kind of just have to do your best, and when an opportunity comes, you kind of jump on it. So the best planning you could do was to be open enough to jump on an opportunity when it became available. As you progress, and I've dealt with higher budgets and bigger things, you spend more of that money on your planning and strategizing and putting the people together to assure that certain things will happen. But there's always going to be a certain percentage of things that just don't go to plan. The weather changes, an actor shows up late to set or not at all. Certain things just happen, and then you have to deal with it. So if you want to take it maybe from the artistic perspective of a filmmaker, plan for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
If you like planning, plan for things to go wrong. Just incorporate that into your plan.
Yeah.
There's a thing I always do, and most filmmakers who are worth their salt will do it as well, or producers, is you create a contingency reserve fund. Put a little money aside for when things don't go to plan. And give yourself that buffer, give yourself a little room. Mm-hmm. And, all I could really say is that when the plan goes out the window, is that that's your moment. That's your moment to really see how present you are, to really see how much of a champion you are, to see what you can make of it, because, a lot of life is not going to go to plan.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you. Just a lot of things are not going to go to plan.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to do life and play it full, then you better be willing to plan for things to go wrong, or things to not go to plan at least.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be all right, Go back to the law of presence. Go back to the law of play. That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
The best things often come from things not going to plan.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.